Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good and the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and it's a great show this week, just like always, right? And one reason for that is because Harry is with me tonight. Harry, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm ready here to sit in with you, learn about Ernest Shackleton, review the book, and explore what he's got to offer.
Yeah, and that is it's a lesson in endurance, both figuratively and what's it when it really happened, and figuratively
And
and
literally,
literally. Thank you.
in
See this.
literature.
Don't ever get old, Harry. You will forget things like literally. Hey, thank you to all our listeners. Without you, we would not be the global top 10% podcast that we are. As always, you can reach us at Bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Questions, comments, praise. If you got bad things to say, well, just write them on a sheet of paper, fold it up real small, throw it in a fire. Okay. And but hey, if you're new to our podcast, welcome. Thank you for coming. We are glad you are here. Listen to all the Shackleton stuff. Listen to the Magellan stuff, the Lewis and Clark stuff, all those things, and all the other episodes in between, and tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. Remember to subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. Those really help us a lot. And the other thing you can do, because I know a lot of you are saying, how can we help the buff? All right. There's two things you can do. One, share the love, share the buff, tell your friends. And in all seriousness, that really does help us a lot. If we can get more listeners that what do they say? Helps us share the load. And then the other thing you can do is you can click on the link in our description and support our sponsors. That's a wonderful thing. Use the little Bufnagle code. We'll have that ad coming up here in a little bit. But back to Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton was in a boat, 27 buddies. When we left you, he was frozen in the ice in the Weddell Sea in February of 1915. And things were, well, they just kind of sucked.
Yeah, and he is at the mercy of the currents and the wind of the Antarctic in the Weddell Sea.
Yeah, so the Weddell Sea is it's north of Antarctica, like everything else.
Yeah.
But it's on the that kind of easty area. There's that peninsula, that arm of the Weddell Sea that goes of the Antarctica. The peninsula is actually called the Palmer Peninsula. Harry, I didn't have that last week. Oh, and I also said incorrectly that there were walruses that they ate, and that's not true. They only ate seals.
And penguins.
Oh yeah, and penguins, and and every now and then they would pull something out of the water too, some kind of fish species or something like that, something out of a Michael Crichton book, right? But we had some reactions last week that I got through the wonders of the interwebs, and somebody mentioned that what I should do is require everyone listening to stop right now, go get the book. The book is Endurance by, who's this by, Harry?
By Alfred Lansing.
Alfred Lansing, right, with an introduction by Nathaniel Philbrick, who did our Pilgrim book. This is the great book, 49 printings or so. Let's call it 50, rounded up to 50. This is a great book. It is a page turner. Get the book. All right. So I should require you to get the book and then start listening again. And the other thing somebody said to me is, so they were stuck on the ice. Why didn't they just walk to where they need? It's just ice, right? So we've all ice skated. Why don't you just it's a long way, but
Sure, you can just
walk it.
strap on your boots and get going, right?
So why can't they walk it?
I would say that is the most inhospitable ice that you can imagine. It's not the same as a pond, right? So it's the ice in the Antarctic is churned up by the current, by the wind, pressure against other ice flows, and it ends up getting really choppy and really sharp. I think brutal is the right word to describe it.
Yeah, I grew up in southeastern Wisconsin, and we had our share. We had a pond when I was in high school. We had a pond behind our house, and there were smaller ponds that a lot of people would ice skate on, play hockey, and all those sorts of things. And sometimes you would get really smooth ice, and sometimes if it was very windy, you'd get bumpy ice. And bumpy ice was it was just bumpy. It was like corrugated. It was bumpier than smooth ice. Had we had a Zamboni, we could have smoothed it out. But if you've seen the ice that forms on the Great Lakes, and you've seen the wind blow it to like to the east side of Lake Michigan, or if you see the ice pile up in the corner there in that eastern side of Lake Erie, it's not ice that you can walk on. It's just a mess. It's a solid water.
It's a mountain of ice, really.
Right, and then
more rock than water.
And then couple that with the fact that this Weddell Sea is 800, 1,000 miles across, and there are really strong winds blowing gigantic pieces of ice every which way. It is just a mess, and you can't walk it. And then if you do that in Antarctic summer, the top of the ice melts, and you get this, and you have a mess. You just have
slush right on top.
It's a slushy. It's almost a smoothie, Harry, on top of the ice. And if you try to walk, you fall into holes. You can fall actually all the way through a hole in the ice into the ocean, and things can eat you. If you have dogs, they can fall in. It's hard to pull sleds and stuff. And the other thing, getting back to the story here, is these guys. They wanted to hike. This was really important that they do this, right? Why were they doing all this? Well, they wanted to hike across Antarctica to the South Pole and, into the Weddell Sea.
And then across.
Right. And then out through the Ross Sea. And they had a lot of stuff to bring. All right. On February 24th, which is a week after I think we left them on the 17th, the 17th, the 24-hour sun stopped on February 17th. So officially, Southern Hemisphere summer was over on the 17th. The first time they had sunset in 2 months. On the 24th, they were 60 miles from the bay where they wanted to land and disembark. Right, so they were really, really close. But like we said, it was too far to walk. Even if, let's say you're fit English gentleman in the early part of the 20th century, the 1915. You could probably walk that in 3 days, 60 miles, 20 miles a day, right? That's easy walk. I mean, if it was just a walk, I mean, if you just walk, if you're playing golf or, hiking around, maybe laps in the mall, that sort of thing, or you could do easily 20 miles a day. But the issue was all the equipment and then the nature of the ice. All right. So they had and they didn't know what would happen when they get to the edge of it's not like the ice just fills up to the edge of the land and you just walk down the ice to the shore and then you step across, because the surf and stuff kicks the ice up and out. You're going to run into the edge of the ice flow. They would have had to carry a year's worth of supplies because they would have had to camp and to get through winter and then hike it when it was hikeable. Otherwise, you're going to the least hospitable part of the planet during the least hospitable time of the year, because on the least hospitable planet in the solar system, all right, the other ones are not at all hospitable, right. So this is the only one that has hospitality of any amount, but it's the smallest amount, and this is the worst place
in the worst location,
on the worst location at the worst time of the year. You would have to do that, all right. So they have to carry a year's supply of stuff. They would have to carry the lumber to build. They were going to build this hut that they would live in and work in and stuff during the camping time. And their dogs were not sled dogs. They were they needed dogs, but they didn't get like Iditarod trained. Did I ever tell you this, Harry? Okay. So I meant, this is a little side note, but this is all right. So I'm in graduate school and we were, I was teaching the introductory stats classes or TAing the stats classes, I guess it was. And on we had a test scheduled for on a Friday, and it was Thursday afternoon, and I was in my office, and this kid comes literally running into my office here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And he comes in, he says, "Dude," they all start that way, right? "Dude, I can't take the test tomorrow." I was like, "Why not?" He goes, "I have to go to Alaska. I've just been chosen to be on Susan Butchard's Iditarod support team. My flight leaves in 3 hours. I got to get to Denver." I was like, that is the greatest excuse I have ever heard to not make test. Let me know how it goes when you get back. And he left. He just ran out of the office. So he worked with real sled dogs. That guy did. But Shackleton had just like Canadian mutts. These were just dogs
Just
he could
pack
get.
dogs, really.
Yeah, and they had their dogs had been on the trip the whole way, right?
Yes.
They left in August.
Some of them had puppies on the trip.
There were puppies, and that was kind of a fun thing that everybody liked the puppies.
Yep.
Puppies are cute. They're fuzzy. They have big feet, floppy ears. So on the 24th of February, they're stuck, and they figure, you know what, we're going to be here for the winter. We're going to have to figure out how to camp this thing out, live in the ship. So they took the dogs off, and they built these little they called them dogloos, like igloos for dogs, dogloos, right? So they make these little huts for the dogs to go live in. And they had brought 69 dogs with them. Harry, 70 dogs. That's a lot of dogs. That's you have to feed all those. Like they had those dogs on the ship the whole way since August. Those dogs have been on the ship running around doing dog things, barking and fighting with each other. And they were not well-behaved dogs. Okay. These were, like I said, they were not
just above feral.
There's like you take two feral dogs and you deliberately mate them and you take the offspring. That's pretty much who these dogs were. They were like one step up from feral. So they moved the dogs off the ship to the little dogloo camp right outside the ship on the ice floe. And they didn't have a whole lot of work to do. I mean, they're just standing around waiting, and they had about 3 hours of work a day. They would go hunting. Right. And in February, they could hunt very easily and get lots of meat. We talked about storing up large quantities of meat last week. But starting in March, the hunting didn't get quite as good because the animals are migrating northward because winter. Isn't that from Game of Thrones? Isn't winter?
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. All right. These seals that they would hunt, Harry, weighed 400 pounds. These are. I don't know. Like I see the seals at the circus. It's been a long time since I've been to the circus. But you see the seal with the ball on his nose at the circus.
Yeah.
And they look like, oh, there's like a little puppy seal. It looks like a little These were really big things, and they would hunt these seals and they didn't want to waste a lot of ammunition on them. So the killing of the seals became very barbaric, but they needed to eat and they needed to get blubber to help them fuel their stove.
Yeah, they spent too much coal on the way down.
Right. And then there's some times when the ship, what was that?
They underestimated how much they were going to burn.
Yeah. And so they had to like convert the stove, and instead of burning just coal, to be able to actually burn blubber, which produces terrible amounts of thick black smoke.
Salt black, yeah.
And they got their faces covered. They lived in these terrible conditions. So they have the dogs, and of the 69 dogs they had, by like March or by April, only 54 of the 69 dogs were still around because they had died. These dogs got sick. And when they did autopsies on these dogs, the two surgeons that were there, and they found they had these big foot-long worms in their gut. They had forgotten, well, note to self, okay? Bring dog dewormer powder when you bring dogs to the Antarctic because they get worms, or they have had worms.
I'll write it on my to-do list.
Yeah, put that on that. Yeah, I'm sure you have a note thing on your phone. Stuff to bring. Okay, dog dewormer. Right, you said, but they had 8 new puppies, which was great. The dogs were not well behaved. So what Shackleton did when they were on the ice just waiting, he set up a team. He's like, okay, you're in charge of this group of dogs and this sled team. And so then they kind of had competition, and they would take the dogs out and they would run them, and they would use the dogs to drag these 400-pound seals back to the ship. And all this time while this is happening, the ice is slowly rotating them and moving them west, on average about 2.5 miles a day.
Yeah, west-northwest.
Yeah, and it was more. So it's moving them kind of away from their goal, but they're moving. Okay, and it's a little bit more west, so it's going toward the peninsula. And if you look at these maps, you can see how this thing rolls around, gets there. By May 2nd, they had moved 130 miles since they first got stuck. And that's an interesting thing because you think, well, it's only 2.5 miles. I could, in my car, I can cover that in 2.5 minutes. But once you get to 130 miles, that's a decent chunk of change. And darkness is coming, Harry, because what's coming?
Well, you're going to have Antarctic night.
Antarctic, what do they call it? Perpetual night or something like that.
Yeah, and because there's a good description here of exactly what that feeling is in perpetual blackness. Yeah, so it's direct from the book here. In all the world, there's no desolation more complete than the polar night. It is a return to the ice age. No warmth, no life, no movement. Only those who have experienced it can fully appreciate what it means to be without the sun day after day and week after week. Few men unaccustomed to it can fight off its effects altogether, and it has driven some men mad.
Yeah, the description of, and that's a great paragraph here. That's a great little piece of literature there, and that's the thing that I found really unexpected in this book. It's a story of guys living out on the ice and clubbing seals to death because they're hungry and fighting the ocean and all sorts of things. But every now and then, there's little pieces in this book that are really grand little chunks of literature, pieces of helping to understand what these guys were going through mentally, what Shackleton was going through with his desire to be a good leader and to be responsible for all these men. So the book is more than just a story. It's good literature too, which is, to me, it's really
right. And it's an insight, especially because a lot of this is pulled from diaries that a guy's had. It's an insight into the minds, and it really pulls you into the story as opposed to having an omniscient, omnipresent view of things.
They were on that ice for a long, long time. And in total, it's hard to imagine being in darkness all of the time. But what day was that? Whenever that comes, I guess that's late May, the sun goes down for good and it doesn't come up again until July or August. I forget the day. It's pitch black. If the moon is out, you can see the moon doesn't like rise and set, like it kind of swirls around. I mean, it's a completely different world there. And I can't imagine what it's like to think that the sunrise isn't always imminent. And as I've gotten older, I've come to like nighttime less and less. When the sun goes down, certainly in the winter, it produces in me a real longing for daybreak. And it hasn't gotten to the point where I stop doing things and I curl up in a ball and cry when the sun goes down. But it's a bad feeling. It was like I just want the sun back. I need light. I need light. And to spend week, like he said, day after day and week after week in pitch blackness, and it's cold. I can't reiterate. We forget how cold it is, and they're out there on the ice, and they have to feed
and it's windy, and there's no television to watch.
Yeah. And my internet signal.
My internet's not working.
Hey, Shaq, my internet's not working.
And the Wi-Fi and the ship went down.
That's right. It is remarkable, but there's no evidence in May of 1915, after 9 months on the ship there, since they started and now stuck in the ice, there was not any evidence of any friction. So there's some people that kind of got along better than others, and certain people that people didn't really like. But Shackleton set up a situation where they kept, things were as light as they could be. That they had a routine, which is very important to have, and then they had social occasions. So like he says here, on page 52, right? There were a regular series of social occasions. Each Saturday night before the men turned in, a ration of grog was issued to all hands, followed by the toast, "To our sweethearts and wives." And invariably a chorus of voices would add, "May they never meet." Right. So on Saturday they'd have a mug of grog, and on Sunday evenings they would have music from the record player. They brought a phonograph, Harry.
Yeah.
And there's a funny story in there that they brought the phonograph, but they couldn't use it very often because they had ordered, you need a needle to play the phonograph. It's a little piece of, in those cases it was wood. It was a wooden needle, and they ordered 5,000 needles for the trip, but they didn't get phonograph needles. They got like
sewing needles.
Right. So they were stuck with 5,000 embroidery needles.
You can attach a few for the seals, right?
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with 5,000. I don't know. And there's funny things like that in there. And I think that's guys would tell stories and read poems to each other, and they would do these because at this point they're just hanging out camping, and they were living in the ship. The dogs were living outside the ship, but they would have to get up in the day, and they'd have to use the potty over the behind the ridge, and they would take care of the dogs and stuff. But other than that, they hung out in the ship for several months in the dark, in the cold, on the ocean, at the worst time of the year.
It sounds like a dream.
Well, Harry, one thing I really love.
What's that?
Smoothies.
Oh, yeah, they're delicious. I recommend the Blend Jet 2. It's portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita on the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. The Blend Jet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. And it lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via USB-C. And best of all, the Blend Jet 2 cleans itself. Just blended water with a drop of soap. You are good to go. And when I use the Blend Jet 2, I like to have all my different colors and available options. Jamie likes to match it with her outfit. She's using a pink one when she wears pink, purple when she's wearing purple, and I just stick with the classic black.
Yeah, there are lots of options out there. So what are you waiting for? Go get yourself a Blend Jet 2. Go to the link in the description for blendjet.com and grab yours today, and be sure you use the promo code Bufnagle to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of Blend Jet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the Blend Jet 2 portable blender. Go to the link in the description for blendjet.com and use the code Bufnagle to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal. So it was warm inside the ship because it was a very nice ship and they had a furnace going, but it was cold outside. It was very cold. In June, the average temperature was 17 degrees below zero. Here it says the weather grew continually worse. Late in May, the temperature dropped below zero and stayed there. During the first half of June, the average reading was minus 17. But the scene from the deck of the Endurance was often fantastically beautiful. In clear weather, if the moon was out, it swept in bold, high circles through the starlit skies for days on end, casting a soft, pale light over the floes. At other times, there were breathtaking displays of the aurora australis, the Antarctic equivalent of the northern lights. Incredible sunbursts of green and blue and silver shot up from the horizon into the blue-black sky, shimmering iridescent colors that glinted off the rock-hard ice below. But apart from the increasing cold, the weather remained remarkably stable and free from gales.
It's great. It's wonderful for June. But then July comes around, right? And this is July of 1915 is kind of the beginning of a cascading series of events that just get progressively worse until the end of the story.
Right. And it starts on July 14th. They make a note that they had a celebration on June 22nd, which is the winter solstice for them. Mm-hmm. And they had a celebration, probably extra grog, maybe an extra cup of tea or something like that. But on the 14th of June, the barometer dropped tremendously and a storm came through. And these are storms that make our 70-mile-an-hour winds. The snow blew through any crevice. Have you ever been in a snowstorm where I remember after my birthday in 1983, I had some friends at the house for my birthday, and we got snowed in. And the next day we tried to take people home. I remember being in the car got stuck on the road, and the wind was howling so fast that the snow would blow through the weather stripping around the windows and into the car. And those weren't 70-mile-an-hour winds. Those were like 30-mile-an-hour winds. These were 70-mile-an-hour winds for Shackleton and his buddies. This was, it got to negative 34 degrees. It was...
but what's the wind chill, Rafe?
What's the wind chill? Don't get me started on wind chill.
It was cold.
It's really cold. The snow... By 2:00 the following morning, the whole ship vibrated as the wind screamed through the riggings at 70 miles an hour. The snow was like a sandstorm blown up from the pole. Nothing could keep it out, though they lashed tarps over the hatches and tried to seal them off. By noon, it was impossible to see more than half the length of the ship. The temperature was 34 degrees below zero. Shackleton ordered no man venture farther than the dog kennels, which are only a few feet from the ship. And the men who fed the dogs had to crawl on their hands and knees to keep from getting blown away. Within 2 minutes of leaving the ship, the blinding, suffocating snow blocked their eyes and mouths. And this gigantic snowdrift formed up on one side of the ship because the wind's blowing, and you know how snowdrifts, like it blows away on one side and lands on the other side. They had this 14-foot snowdrift on one side, and Shackleton was like, this snowdrift weighs a whole lot. This snowdrift is going to impact how this ship sits in this frozen place on this floe. So they had to get out and like shovel away the snowdrift. It was just terrible.
It's bad, and it doesn't get better. And this is kind of when they start to realize the pressure that the ice is putting on the ship. The Endurance is well built. It's very well built, right? It's the best wooden ship of its age, probably ever created. And the ice is still pummeling it, and it's starting to make some noises and scare the guys at night.
And that's what they saw. The storm broke up the ice into pieces and then blew it back together into a, like, imagine taking a nice jigsaw puzzle that's put together and then you break it apart and now it doesn't sit flat. And because of that, it grabs the wind even more and starts driving. And the edges of the ice grab the wind and they really start pushing. And on July 22nd, which was 8 days later, a crack appeared in the ice, and they were very, very excited. And they were like, "Hey, it's going to break up. Let's get out. Let's cut a hole from us over here to this crack in the ice." But no, it sealed back up, and they weren't able to get out of there. Summer, the sun starts appearing a little bit later in August. They were hoping the ice floes would break up in August. There's a flow break on August 1st. Things start moving. Shackleton gets all the dogs on board in 8 minutes. They load all the dogs on board and they get ready to sail. And the minute they get off the ice with the dogs, the ice floe cracks and then crushes the dog huts. I mean, so they're living. It's like a movie where you think, really, they had to make that dramatic moment, but. But that's how it is. They were there and they dodged these bullets here and there just by being able to work quickly. They got knocked around there in August. They got ready to they were going to lower the boats because they were afraid the ship was going to break up. But more pressure came at the end of August. By September 10th, the temperature was up to 1.9 degrees. Woohoo!
All right.
We're above zero.
It's hot.
They were, and keep in mind, they were running low on food because they had 5,000 pounds of meat that we said, but all the animals had migrated north. But on the 15th of September, they killed their first penguin. They killed their first seal of the spring on the 16th of September, and spring started coming. But with that comes a break of the ice and more worries about more pressure. So on October 10th, the temperature got to 9.8 degrees area. It's getting really warm there, right?
Yep.
And the ship at this time, there's actually some clear water around the ship. It's sitting like in a pool of water in the ice. And they were like, let's get this going.
Just ram forward and get
sure.
out of the ice.
So they fire up the boilers. They're getting ready to go, and they're, oh, shoot, we got a leak. And so the boilers are leaking, so they have to fix that. And so they spend several days trying to make everything work. So they have to pump water out, and they're working, and it's cold. Did I mention it's cold? It's still cold. Okay. On October 18th, this pressure ridge comes and knocks the ship 30 degrees off of vertical. Of course, the dogs go sliding off to the sides and everything's chaotic. They put down these strips on the deck so the dogs could climb up and down. They eat their meals sitting on the side. They said it was like sitting in a grandstand watching a ball game. This thing was slipped like that. And the ship goes back to even after about a day, and they fire up the boilers. So they're working all this time because the ship almost knocked itself over, and they had to clean up all the messes and stuff like that. And on October 21st and 22nd. So remember, it was warm. It was like 10 degrees, and now it drops to minus 14. There's a huge wind shift. There's more pressure. And this one is the beginning of the end of the Endurance. Right at 6:45, the pressure hit 6:45 p.m. on October 24th. A heavy mass of ice ground against Endurance's stern, tearing the stern post partly away from the starboard planking. Water poured into the ship. McNeese, he's the carpenter guy, Harry, was sent to check and reported back that it was rising rapidly in the forward hold. Rickenson said the same of the engine room. They bring some pumps in and they start pumping water. They realize if we're going to keep, we got to get the pumps working, and then we need hand pumps. And these guys work like they work all night, 15 minutes on the pump, just like constant pumping for 15 minutes. And they, then I take a rest and you come in and you pump. And if you're not pumping, then you're helping move stuff around. They do this all night. They prep the boats to get off the ship. You can't leave something on the ship, because if the ship gets crushed or goes down, then you lose that. So they have to get the dogs off. They have to get the boats off. They pump all day. And at 9 p.m. they have all their essential provisions on one side of the boat. They got the lifeboats on the other side of the boat. They're still pumping all the rest of the night, and the pressure keeps up the next day. And at 4 p.m., the stern gets torn off of the ship and water flows in. And by 5 o'clock, Shackleton and the other officers realize it is time. And Shackleton nodded to Wild. Wild went forward along the quaking deck to see if anybody was still in the forecastle of the boat. He found Howe and Blakewell trying to sleep after a turn on the pumps. He put his head in and said, "She's going, boys. It's time to get off."
Rather poetic, too. And what's also kind of funny is he does that, and at the same time, a group of emperor penguins comes to stop watch, right? And the penguins stood for a moment watching the tortured ship, then raised their heads, uttered a series of weird mourning, dirge-like cries. And it was all the more eerie because the men had not ever heard such a sound before.
Yeah, that was a hilarious piece of that they were like, they're all working and struggling and pumping and saving stuff. And all these penguins come by and they're like, "You're going to die," or whatever they say, I don't know what penguins, maybe that's what penguins sound like. And they kind of waddled in and then they waddled away. It was like something out of a Wes Anderson movie or something. Right, it was Wes Anderson does Shackleton. Okay, that would be fun. Have you seen that little video of Wes Anderson does Star Wars?
I've got some time after this.
I'll let you look that one up. So that is, wow, it's been 30 minutes. Okay, so there they are. They were stuck in the ship, and now it's not quite as good. It's no longer winter, but now they're stuck.
They're stuck off the ship.
Off the ship, and they're going to have to camp, or walk, or die,
or both,
but not all three.
Right.
Yeah, that's where they are. So we will take up next week where we left off. If you have more questions, if we screwed something up, if you know something about pressure, if you have been in one of these places. I know we got some Navy guys out there who maybe have done such things as this. If you've done something like that, we would love to hear from you and get your experience on that. Harry, anything else?
No, I think that's it. I'm excited to, it's for me, it's like reading the book again. It's interesting, I'm trying to wrap up here, but Shackleton goes from stuck on the ship to stuck on the ice. And we're going to learn very soon, and hopefully at the end of the next episode, that they are now stuck on boats.
Yeah, it's getting less. Where are they, Harry? They're at the most inhospitable place, on the least hospitable place in the solar system, and it's getting
worse.
It's getting inhospitabler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. In the meantime, for those of you who are sitting in the warm, comfy chairs or looking forward to spring somewhere, I want you to go out and seek the good, be the good, and spread the good, and enjoy the adventure of life.